Welcome back to Mind at the Table, where we sit down with mind-shaping business from the inside out. Today's guest is special for me. Jason and I have known each other for 20-some years, but only recently reconnected. We've swung clubs, bowled with frozen turkeys, and shared pints in the past. Jason is someone who's deep in the trenches of go-to-market strategy, revenue leadership, and startup growth. Jason Cahill, founder of Wayfinder GTM. Jason, great to have you here.
Thanks, Toby. By the way, my golf game hasn't improved in 20 years, just to let you know.
Neither is mine.
It's still brutal, but great to be here. Thanks, man.
Yeah. No, that's, you know what, I always said back in the day when I worked for the banks that I was the perfect banker golfer. I let my clients win without them knowing that I was, without them thinking I was trying to do it right. So all good. Hey, let's go back a little bit. What's the journey that led you to start Wayfinder GTM?
Yeah, sure. Well, Wayfinder came out of mostly just frustration that I saw out in the market and in my life, and as working in different companies and different positions. I've been in positions where I was in sales as a contributor or as a leader, marketing, RevOps, lots of different positions. And I saw that every team would just start rowing in different directions. They weren't working together on a project or a vision, and everything wasn't clear of where one person stopped and the next one picked up the baton. So I started to think of like, how do I, take what I do every day and then make that into, a business.
I mean, we see a lot of that, right? Companies wonder why revenue or profitability is not there. And they have a great product, they have a great go-to-market strategy, but then internally there's just a disconnect, and people are rowing, as you said, in different directions, and the company just can't get the traction that they should be getting. And so I can see how aligning that makes a lot of sense. So was there a moment when you realized that you had a knack then for aligning sales, marketing, and that whole customer success experience?
I think so. Yeah. When I got into RevOps, it was very clear to me, we were launching several different products on the market. I was also aligning teams that through M&A and acquisitions that we got at the company, and, trying to figure out how do we bring this project or bring this vision to life. When I'm talking to, everyone from development, marketing, sales enablement, customer success, implementation, what have you, to make this thing happen. And I realized that I've never been in a company where they've had that kind of keystone person kind of project managing, I'll say with empathy, because I've worked directly in those divisions and understood where the lengths of their I guess their job ended and then the next one picked up. So I saw this a lot when I came into the company. I wasn't in RevOps, but just working in positions in sales and enablement and marketing ops. And I saw that frustration, and I saw the frustration at the C-suite level, and thought, well, I could do that. I pitched my way into the VP of RevOps job to do specifically this. So I realized that this is something that I could probably repeat outside of the company as well.
It's awesome. And you may have kind of already answered this a little bit in that answer, but let's maybe drill into and explore it a bit. So for those who haven't come across Jason Cahill before, Wayfinder GTM, what's the core problem that you solve? Can you narrow it down to a core problem you're solving?
Yeah, I think, at its core, I solve the alignment problem in organizations. Customers or companies typically don't fail because they're run out of ideas, unless you're, Blockbuster or Kodak or somebody like that. You run out of ideas. But if typically companies want to innovate, they always want to stay ahead of the curve or ahead of the competition. But usually they lack the clarity of like, how do I proceed? What's the best way to make this thing happen? And they kind of forget about that part. They kind of post that vision in an email maybe, or in a Slack message, and say, this is where we're going, and then you guys figure it out. And teams are kind of like wondering, well, who's more right in this situation? How much scope do I get? Where's my scope creep? Like all of those things. I think that's probably the core problem that I solve is the alignment issue within organizations.
So if I'm a business and I'm going, okay, what does a fractional CRO actually look like day to day? How would you describe that to them?
Yeah, I would say that I'm part-time strategist, part-time coach, part-time operator. Um, so it wouldn't matter if I was into marketing models, or the next day I'm in the classroom teaching enablement, or the next day I'm aligning systems for integrations or how to configure those systems to kind of relieve blockages or make sure that revenue is flowing through the customer journey, I guess, end to end. I think that's really where, as a fractional leader, that's probably my number one goal, is to just make sure that we're removing speed bumps, removing blockages, making sure that the customer journey, especially in sales orgs, that the customer journey is frictionless, and we're maximizing revenue in every sense, every stop in that customer journey as well. And that means continuing on later after they've contracted and become a customer.
Yeah, and I see that ever important today, more so than even in times past. Um, you see the impacts of tariffs hitting companies, and maximizing revenue, maximizing profitability, and maximizing the client experience are all key ingredients to navigating a very narrow or narrowing margin business, to keep it viable and to lead into the future where you can afford to employ more people and grow the business again. And if people aren't adapting and adjusting right now, then there's a good chance they are going to be in real issues within the next 3 years, because the world is changing so quickly. And that's not even getting into things like integrating AI and technology into the business, which I assume is part of what you do as well. You've been working, and that actually brings up a good question, because you've been working with companies at different stages. And what's the biggest difference between an early stage GTM and a scaling GTM?
Yeah, sure. I would say early stage is more about, does this make sense? Am I doing something that customers would pay for? And do they care enough to pay for it? Later on, when we're scaling, it's more of like, how do I, now that I know that customers care about this, they see value, I understand the value that we offer to the customers. How do I scale this? How do I automate some tasks that were getting repetitive, and making sure that we're still taking the people that helped us grow the company, that had the great ideas, had the innovation, to think about critical thinking and solutions, and now free them up to keep doing that. So we're moving the company forward, as opposed to just getting mired down into all of the daily repeatable tasks that we could automate with software or AI.
That's a great thought. I mean, very similar in concept to what we do at Hyperion, and that you're looking to add more value than you are cost. And our kind of pitch is that if we're not adding more value than cost, then we don't deserve to be at the table. And I think that you're kind of in that same realm, just taking more of a niche lens on what you can do to help that company be profitable, to help remove roadblocks, to help sustain growth. And that leads to the next question, really. How do you balance the quick wins with building a sustainable revenue engine?
Yeah, it's kind of a dual strategy, I would say. You often need boots on the ground, to go to direct with outbound, and get some quick wins on your base, and to build your base. And you also need to invest in that brand engine, the marketing part, which is typically fat-tailed. And usually when I say like fat-tailed, meaning like it's a small inflection of cash or automation or tools or strategy, and it often compounds over time, bringing in more and more customers as your brand kind of gets steam and gets more recognition, and people start to get comfortable with your company and what you value and your offering. So that's kind of what you need to play both. You need quick wins, and you need long-term wins as well. And you kind of have to balance both. It's difficult, but of course it can be done. But you have to make the investments early, and you have to be consistent in that investment to pay the dividends at the end.
Sometimes, you want some quick wins, but it can be short-sighted to think, oh, if we're not producing quick wins, that we're not producing value, and that the benefit to the business from an ROI perspective won't be there. Some things you need to be patient with, and I'm not saying that's true with what you're doing, but I'm just saying in general, right? And I find the environment we live in today, where everything, AI and everything else is on tap, immediate responses, immediate rewards, even from a business perspective, the expectations can be, we need quick wins, but the real solution may be longer term, and that we need to make some adjustments that are going to take a few months, that are going to take half a year or even 3 quarters, and then you're going to see this big payoff at some point. That also leads to, if someone's going to bring you in as a fractional leader, what we hear repeatedly is they have to trust you. And so when you're going out to market and trying to convince people that, hey, I can come in and have an impact on your business, and they don't know you yet, and they're not coming from their accountant or their lawyer or someone that's been a partner in the business for 10 years that they trust implicitly, it's hard to build that. So when you step into a company as a fractional leader, how do you build that trust quickly?
I mean, the good thing about me is that I've been in sales for a very, very long time. So I've learned this as kind of like a knee-jerk reaction in any situation. I can read someone in 30 seconds. But I think the way I start, especially with any kind of conversation with a C-suite person or someone who's looking to bring me in fractionally, is not here's what I can do, is more of like, what are you seeing in your day-to-day? What's your idea? What's your vision for this? How do you want to, do you know where you want to go? I can tell you there's multiple ways of getting there. You can chart a path 50 different ways, and I'm cool with all of them. But if the destination isn't clear to them, or it's not clear to their team, they're not really going to get there. And figuring out how to get there is kind of where I shine. But I don't come into, I've been in enough, a noob at a lot of different companies. And I think in a leadership position, they often expect you to come in and go, okay, here's the plan, guys. And you throw it on the table and we're like, this is the plan. We're going to work the plan. I often like to start with understanding what their perspective is, how they see the value in what they're doing, or what the value in the vision is, and how they think they can contribute to that vision and how we can get there. Because I feel like more people are invested when they start to feel like they've contributed. There's a folklore tale that I always think about when I'm stepping into a new role, and it's called Stone Soup. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one.
No.
It's I think it's like a Slavic or a Russian folklore tale, and these two guys walk into a village and they're asking for food, and everyone's like, forget it, buddy, we're not giving you anything. We're a poor village, and we're not going to give some strangers food. And they think, okay, well, they sit down, they build a fire, they bring this pot out and they fill it with water, and the two guys, one of them puts in a stone that they got from the river, and then the next guy puts in another stone, and then they keep doing this, and the villagers eventually are like, what the heck are these guys doing? You can't make a soup with stones. And so eventually a villager comes out and puts in a single carrot, and then the next person comes in and they put in half a cabbage, and then the next person comes in and they you see where this is going, and they start to build. And that's where Stone Soup comes from. It's like, you have to start with something and then build it over time. And if you make the first move, especially as a leader, you have to, even if it's a stone, it's something very simple, people will then contribute more and more if they feel like they have a good basis and they feel supported in order to contribute. So I always think of that. I love that story. I have tons of those, but I always think of that, and it's a good story on empathy and leadership when I come into a company.
I love that. I actually can even see from a psychology standpoint how effective a Stone Soup approach would be, because you're letting them know that you're vested and you're putting in the effort, and yet it's a first step that doesn't seem to really make any sense. And so people almost are inclined to go, oh, we got to help them, like, let's throw in here and help, because we're not going to get anywhere putting more stones in the pot, right? So what can we add to value? How do we, and they get engaged and drive some value for themselves and the ability to then help the organization. So I can really see how that would be effective. That's very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Jason.
No problem.
So now we're gonna put you on the spot and ask you, okay, you've said all these great things, but tell us about a recent challenge that you faced with a client engagement, and how did you navigate that for them?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to go with the problem that probably every organization or larger organization has between sales and marketing, because I worked in both. And being in marketing, I understand, what it is to deliver a marketing qualified lead, working hard on to get those top of funnel leads and handing it off to sales for sales to say, well, these were garbage or these are trash. And, I'm not winning any of these leads. I'm not converting any. And I've had that issue in multiple companies, so I'm sure this happens everywhere. But when I, instead of taking sides, I really reframed it around the buyer's journey. And the real issue actually turned out in the last one was, handoff timing and the follow-up. So what happens in between sales cycles, or in between sales stages, sorry. And we, after, looking at, hundreds of videos, analyzing hundreds of emails, talking to everyone in the go-to-market team. So that means marketers, sellers, implementation, literally anyone who's touching the client. I wanted to know where the disconnect was, and we were able to solve it. But solving that boosted obviously the conversion rates and revenue rates, and actually margins eventually as well. But often the solution to those types of problems isn't shoving more leads down the funnel, which a lot of people would turn to and say, well, we just got to put more leads in. If sales isn't converting them, we just need more of them. And not often that people look to the leads that we have, if you're lucky enough to get someone interested, and to remove blockages or speed bumps, perhaps in your own internal process that's hindering the movement of stage to stage for that client, and just letting the process flow more easily. It doesn't always have to be a sales problem or a sales solution or a marketing solution. Sometimes it's just an internal issue that you've never really looked at. So that's a classic one that I like to solve.
Yeah, that makes sense, and stops the finger pointing within the organization and has everybody kind of pulling together and rowing in the same direction again, right? So that's awesome.
Right.
So where do you see the role, going back years ago when we were bowling with frozen turkeys on American Thanksgiving, where we didn't really talk about fractional executives back then. It wasn't even really a thought, but nowadays it's an increasing interest and increasing marketplace, of recruiting. Do you recruit full-time? Do you recruit fractional? So where do you see the role of fractional executives heading in the next few years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I see that, in my last role, for example, or even some of the other projects that I've worked on, where I'm focused on increasing revenue in a specific area. And there's sometimes where I can identify the problem and doing my analysis. It's a really heavy time investment on my part at the beginning. And then once you've done your interviews, you've done your analysis, you've done your models, you've presented the solution, here's the strategy, and you started to implement that throughout the organization. Everyone has their own individual pieces to contribute. Sometimes it's just hands off a little bit, and there's not a lot of things for me to really do except for making sure that we're staying the course. I'm following up, checking in, and it's more of project management at that point, which I don't think is a full 9 to 5 job. So that's kind of where the fractional piece kind of pays off. You're not paying for my time where I'm just sitting here clicking around in Salesforce and looking for other problems. I'm just focused on solving this one that I've already implemented the strategy on. So it's kind of thin-tailed, so it's heavy up front, but later on it
Tails off.
yeah, it kind of tails off, and then you're not paying for what I'm not doing, which I think is a benefit to both of us. And sometimes I can even literally hand this off to a project manager and just check in with them. So it's very, very minimal investment on my time.
Yeah, we see that across the board in a lot of fractional roles, and the reality is often there's a lot of heavy lifting, ideation that happens, etc., that helps solve problems, get systems in place. The issue for corporations sometimes is you get that person who solves that problem. They're high value for you, but now they're not being used to their full potential, and you may not have another problem that needs the resolutions that they can bring to the organization. So what do? Do you let them go now because you're overpaying for something that is just oversight now? And then the issue is, if you do let them go, it doesn't feel good, but also the organization is impacted, because a lot of people within the organization, then that person came in and impacted, value the opportunity to reach, pick up the phone or send a message through Messenger or whatever, Teams, and have a quick conversation about things. And often organizations find out that 12, 18, 24 months down the road, a lot of what was implemented is falling off of the track, and they're not seeing the same success that they initially had from the solutions implemented. So having a model where you can have that heavy lifting and pay for it, front loaded a bit, but keep that person involved, and now you're not paying for the heavy load anymore, but maybe they have a once a week or twice a month touch base with the people in the organization to keep them on track, check on progress, etc. There's a high value in that, and there's not a sour feeling about the way the relationship went, because there's an ongoing engagement with them, but it's also what's best for the business and best for the bottom line. So I think that there's a lot of value in that approach, and I agree, and I think we'll see an increase in fractional value that businesses see and get from working with people who are in fractional roles. So here's a question. I don't know if you've thought of this before, but if Hyperion gave you a blank check to solve one GTM problem for any company in the world, what company are you picking, and what are you fixing for them?
I don't know if it's a company. I mean, there's several answers. I think one of them, when I was doing my MBA in the last couple of years, I was modeling all of my papers based on the former companies that I used to work for. So I was solving problems and challenges that they probably didn't know they had, and using them in my papers. And by the way, I got great marks, just to let you know, on these papers. So I mean, what's that? Sorry?
We wouldn't expect any less.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, I mean, I and most of it I modeled on, HR tech, or payroll or HCM, whatever you want to call that industry, SaaS industry. So I really think that the industry is due for a reframe. They often lead with the technology first instead of solving problems. So I think I would love to get into and solve those types of challenges a lot more, but any kind of solution selling, maybe even probably Tesla as well. I think they have a major marketing problem. I understand that if Elon makes a tweet, that's like his marketing, that how many impressions he gets, but probably not always positive. So I think that they really need a reframe in their marketing on how they market EVs. And I'm a EV owner. I'm a Tesla owner. I love it. But I still think that they probably need some major help in the marketing area. So I'd like to do that.
Tesla, if you're listening, let's find out how you can reach Jason.
I got lots of ideas.
Jason, this has literally been a blast from the past. It's been a long time since we've done something together. So where can people connect with you and learn more about what you're all about and what you're doing?
Yeah. So I have a website, Wayfinder GTM or go-to-market.com. But you probably can just catch me on LinkedIn, send me a DM. If you want to chat, I'm always up for, great conversation and sharing ideas.
Thanks, Jason. This episode was brought to you by Hyperion Business Solutions, helping businesses one conversation at a time. Ideas are easy, conversations are leverage, and the smartest minds, they never leave the table too early.